I'd like to share with you the story of how I set my mind on fire, broke it, and then got up the next morning and created this drawing. In truth, this all began months ago when I watched a video where a physicist talked about a very particular problem in cosmology known as the flatness problem. I thought it sounded really interesting, so I gave it a watch. And he described a lot of things about the shape of our universe. And I just couldn't quite understand what they meant by the shape of it. There was talk about doing some kind of calculations to decide whether our universe was round or flat, or if it was saddle-shaped, and it was all very intriguing. But I remember at the time I didn't have the time to look into it. It just kind of lingered in the back of my mind. So for some reason, a couple of days ago, this popped back into my thoughts, and I thought, what was that thing called again? I looked it up briefly, found out, okay, it's the flatness problem. So I started to look into it. I watched some videos again to try to see if anybody could explain it to me. And it began to make a little bit of sense. There were some physicists who could explain some of the basic concepts behind it, but I was curious. Something about it made me want to find out more. Something told me, this is about the fabric of the universe. I want to see the calculations behind it. Some of you may know that my background is in mathematics, and I feel like while I was going to university to learn how to do math, I just never quite had the time to really delve into topics like these and really see how mathematics is applied in physics or in cosmology. So I said, hey, this is the right time. Let's do it. So as I started looking into this problem, I noticed it was much, much bigger than I ever thought it was. I found articles by professors at various universities, and they started to explain the mathematics. They explained the formulas, talking about Fieldman's equations. So I took several hours and I looked into it. I tried to recreate the formulas. I did some of the calculations, and I felt, okay, I can do this. I can understand this. I was a little bit afraid, though, because it was all so dense. Even as someone trained in deeper mathematics, this was very dense. It was difficult to understand. And yet, I pushed forward. I started to feel like I could do this. I can do this, so I had to try. I went down the rabbit hole for hours and hours and hours, and before I knew it, it was 3 a.m, and the rabbit hole had led me down Fieldman's equations, which led me down to so many other things in the topics of cosmology. I had to figure out what the cosmological constant was. I'd heard of it before. I didn't really know what it was until I found out that it had everything to do with dark energy. I had to figure out what that was. And then I had to look up so many other things in order to find out how all of this made sense. And at the end of that long, frightening rabbit hole, I got all the way to the most frightening thing of all. This was all related to Einstein's equations. And I only have a bachelor's in mathematics, so I thought, there's no way I can tackle this. There's absolutely no way. And I stepped back. And like I said, this was 3, almost 4 in the morning. I was exhausted. I couldn't believe that I'd spent the whole night researching something so dense, something that in no way I could have ever figured out. And yet, I just stepped back for a little moment, and then I thought to myself, no, let me look into this. And as I started to look into it, I realized that I actually could understand some of the calculations. I could understand some of what Einstein himself had figured out. And if there's anything I can tell you is that what I learned here wasn't only about cosmology. It wasn't only some information that I learned about mathematics. What I learned was that Einstein was a true genius because he was artistic. He was creative. Everything that is in these equations it wouldn't have just come to anyone just right off the bat. It was beautiful. And so I've learned a whole lot about the universe, about the shape of reality, about space-time. And here I am. I have broken my mind. I have set my thoughts on fire, and I had such a good sleep that night. So the next morning I woke up and I created this. The fabric of space-time, with all its complexities, with all of its craziness, all of its tangled, messed up parts, all of its mathematics and its physics. This is what it made me create. So I've decided to share it with you so that you could see what it looks like in my little book. So I'm hoping that if any of you out there are afraid of anything and you're hesitating to try something new, I would love to encourage you to just push forward. Try it. You will be amazed at what you are able to create.